Well, this would affect Google. It could affect Twitter. The notion here is we've seen enormous concentration in the social media space. One of the reasons why I think you're seeing the antitrust actions take place. And so what I've been working on are a series of bills, all bipartisan, that would say, how do we put some guardrails on these companies that have such enormous power? My background was in the telecom business, so I borrowed some concepts from that. First, as your reporter indicated, data portability. So if you get tired of Facebook and you want to move all your data, including your cat videos, to a new site, you should be able to do that easily and transparently. For those who are old enough to remember when it was really hard to move from one long-distance carrier to another, Congress had to mandate number portability, and it brought more competition into the marketplace. So we are using data portability as our first concept. Second is, even if you got portability, if you can't still talk to your friends that are on Facebook, then that moving to a new company may not give you the same benefits. So we've also brought in this concept of interoperability. So again, using the analogy to email, you can be a Gmail customer, but still email somebody on Outlook and that be transparent. So portability and interoperability go hand in glove.
So Facebook, I don't love you anymore. I want to go somewhere else. For purposes of this legislation, what constitutes personal data? What's included, what's excluded? And I note in one of the pages on the description of the bill that if the carrier or the platform company does not make money from the data, then the provisions on interoperability and transparency don't apply.
Well, again, Facebook already says they provide this, yet trying to get all of the information that they collect about you and easily transport it to a new company is extraordinarily difficult. This would make this process, transparent, easy to take place, and this bill, we call it the Access Bill, actually works hand in glove as well with another bipartisan legislation that I have that says you ought to, as a customer, be able to know what information Facebook is collecting about you and a rough idea of how much that information is worth. Because too often, I think, consumers believe that services like Facebook or Google are free. There's nothing free about them. They collect enormous amounts of information about us and monetize that through the sale of advertising. Nothing morally wrong with that, but I think consumers ought to have that information. And if they do then choose to move, you ought to be able to make it easy, transparent, and frankly, this would be one of the tools to try to bring more competition to an otherwise pretty already consolidated marketplace.
So, Senator, in the last earnings season, Facebook reported its numbers, and investors were pleased to see that users didn't defect, that there weren't people who were leaving the platform because they're concerned about data issues, and because they didn't defect, advertisers didn't defect either. And I'm wondering, is your thesis that it's so hard to move your data, it's so hard to leave the platform that they aren't, and that if you do this, then people might actually leave?
Well, first of all, remember what's happened since Facebook has managed to consolidate a series of different applications, WhatsApp, Instagram. There was a lot of movement, but people simply moved from one Facebook platform to another. What we're saying is, with that kind of massive heft that Facebook has got, if you're really going to try to introduce a new, better version, the ability to kind of easily move your data to a new site, to a new competitor, and then make sure that you can still talk to people that might remain on Facebook or another platform, you've got to have this data portability and interoperability. So again, on the last quarter, there was a lot of movement, but it was people moving within the Facebook family of apps. What we're simply saying here is let's bring some more competition to this space and data portability, interoperability, and this third concept that says if you want to entrust your data privacy, other data services, you can use a trusted third party. Here I use the analogy of what a lot of homeowners do in terms of hiring out an alarm service company that basically protects their property.
Senator, it might be easier to list the committees in the Senate that you're not a member of than the ones you are, but one of them is international trade and finance, and I want to turn the conversation to China, where this week's sort of musings and rumblings are that progress is being made. Do you criticize the president for taking on China on some of the trade issues that he has enumerated? For example, failure to accept large amounts of American agricultural product, technology transfer, IP theft, and so forth. Is your bother with him, or do you have one, his tactics as opposed to the mission?
No, I think the mission is right. I don't find a lot of places where I agree with Donald Trump, but saying to China, you cannot continue to steal intellectual property. You can't restrain American companies in a way that we don't restrain Chinese companies. When you have this kind of unlevel playing field of state-sponsored enterprises in China getting unfair advantages, I just think his execution on this plan has been awful. The remarkable thing is China is using these same tactics against Japanese companies, against European companies, and where I think the missed opportunity would be to have rallied the world and go to China and say, you're a great nation. You're going to be you are already one of the leading economic powers in the 21st century, but you got to play by the same set of rules. Instead, one of the first things that Trump did out of the box on trade was not take on China, but basically declared Canada a national security risk under so-called Section 232. That is a bad execution on the plan. And what particularly worries me, let me just get this one other point in, is that I think the Trump administration, or Mr. Trump himself, I don't think all the folks in his administration have this necessary problem. Trump has rightfully pointed out on Huawei the national security threat that poses in the new 5G networks. And this is a threat not only to America, but it's a threat to all Western-based nations. And I'm fearful that while Trump has taken the right approach on Huawei in trying to prohibit us buying those 5G networks, that he may trade that away for additional soybean sales. And that scares the dickens out of me, because for the last couple of years, the American intelligence community, defense community, and State Department has been making the case to our allies around the world. And if that gets traded away because he's mixing national security with trade policy, then we're in a heap of trouble.
Senator, one final thing on this, because you have been a supporter, I think a co-sponsor of sort of the legislation that would try to protect Hong Kong or revoke its special status if it no longer is granted that. What should U.S. companies doing business in China do? We just had the CEO of Disney on last hour, in which he said cultural correctness is important if he wants to operate in China. Should U.S. companies not operate in China because they want to be able to help Hong Kong, for example? What is business supposed to do on the issue of China?
I think American companies, and for that matter, Western companies, for years have been willing to sacrifice their values, their principles, to get access to the Chinese market. And I think that's starting to come back and bite them now. We see it in terms of intellectual property theft that sometimes American companies and Western companies have turned a blind eye to. We've seen, in terms of recent years, turning a blind eye to the Chinese government's treatment of 1.5 million Uyghurs, Muslims, who are in re-education camps. We now see, as companies try to turn away from, I think, the rightful democratic expression of folks' views in Hong Kong. Again, I'm not anti-Chinese by any means. I support the people of Hong Kong who don't want to have the Communist Party installed over them. So I think there is going to be a bit of a reckoning for Western companies as they try to navigate this. And clearly we've seen the Chinese government is willing to use any of the tools in its toolkit to force American and Western companies into compliance with kind of so-called Chinese standards. You look at the airlines who mislabel or relabel their maps on Taiwan because of that threat of China. I think we need a thought-out series. China's not going to go away as an economic power. I would go back again to my first point. This is a case where I think not only American companies, but Western companies that still operate under rule of law need to come together and say they're not going to abide by Chinese correctness, or they're not going to abide by China, frankly, misplaying all the rules. And that's going to take some work. But I think this problem is only going to get worse until we take it on.
Senator Warner, thank you very much as always. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys, and go Virginia.
Yes, Senator Mark Warner.